So now moving on to the next phase, Marcy and her team are going to walk you through the framework of the plan and provide a detailed discussion of our enterprise performance management system, where it closely monitors our achievements as well as our operational risk. Marcy, please.
Thank you, Mr. Fechner. Sabrina, you look alone up there.
I know. I was like, Michael, can you come join me?
I know you have a team behind you here, or in front of you. So just a little bit of some setting for Sabrina. This enterprise performance management system was something that we had originally introduced to the board 2 years ago at the summer offsite. I think we were in Monterey. And essentially what this helps the board to do is really fulfill your oversight role around the strategic plan and the strategies that we agreed upon together that would be implemented over the next 5 years. This is a means by which we give you our progress report. And for each one of these measures, both on the strategy side as well as the operational side of the house, we've set performance targets. So what is the outcome that we're trying to accomplish, whether that's a strategic measure or whether that's a key performance indicator of an operational measure. And so we do report those out in red, yellow, or green. And typically what you see from us every quarter is we come and talk to you about red performance. And this is performance that is off of the established targeted thresholds. So we establish what is red performance, what is yellow performance, and what is green performance. And to give you one example of that, in the strategic plan, we have the funded status as one of the key measures. And the funded status sits in red status today at 70%. It does not move into yellow until it hits 80%, I believe, or 80 or 85. And then it does not hit green until it gets into the 90th percentile. So as you heard yesterday, it's going to take some time. We have a 20-year amortization policy to pay off the UAL, so this is going to be a long journey for us. It is likely that the funded status would be continued to reported in red for quite some time. But again, this is an opportunity to provide that oversight role both on the strategy side as well as the operational measures, and how the management team uses it is that we use it for management attention. If we see something that is not performing at the level that we have established as acceptable, then we put management attention on it. And management attention could be assigning some of our lean green belts to go in and take a look at the process. Is it really operating as efficiently as it could be? Is it operating with a customer in mind? And then also we've been using it for resource allocation. So we talked about not adding new PYs or new positions. As positions become vacant, in order to have a strong justification, in order to get a position reallocated to your group, we use this system to say performance is either on target, which is going to make it a little more difficult for you to get that position. But if you can prove that position is off target and that resources would get it back into targeted range, then those get the highest priority in the position pooling. So I'm going to have Sabrina, I don't know if Doug wanted to chime in, or at some point he may as well, but go through our most recent results. And then the management team around the table will also have additional comments. Thanks, Sabrina.
Very good. Thank you, Marcy, for your opening remarks. Good afternoon, board members. My name is Sabrina Hutchins, and I'm the Chief of the Enterprise Strategy and Performance Division. Happy to be here today to facilitate our strategic plan discussion. Before we jump in, just as Marcy mentioned, some really key insights to the goal for our session today. Of course, we want this to be informative. For a few of you, this may be somewhat of a review, but for many of our new board members, this is a great opportunity for an educational update, as only 4 of our current members were here during the development of our strategic plan. So we thought this would be a good opportunity to discuss our approach to strategy formulation, execution, and management of our strategic goals. So our agenda, what to expect, as Marcy mentioned, we have a collaborative agenda. I will start us out to lay the groundwork, and then we will have contributions from many of our executive team. And we encourage, of course, questions from our board members or comments as we're moving through our discussion. So I'm going to jump right in. As always, it's important to start with our foundation, as everything we do aligns to our mission, our vision, and our values. And I always like to say, in the simplest terms, represents who we are and what we want to achieve. This foundation aligns to our 5 strategic goals that provide us the direction over the coming years. And in addition, as Marcy mentioned, we have our outcome measures, and these communicate to the organization our expectations. These are the things that we need to really be good at as they align to our mission. So how do we ensure that we meet these goals and these expectations? It's definitely the people and the process. We do this through our enterprise performance management system, as we call it, and this involves the development, implementation, monitoring and reporting, and ad hoc refinement of performance metrics or our initiatives that truly drive our organization forward. So the intent of this system is to reinforce CalPERS' desire to be transparent and accountable in support of these goals, objectives, and operational expectations. So this system really gives us that comprehensive view of our progress towards meeting these goals, as well as showing our performance as it relates to our operations. And overall, our goal is to deliver value to our customers. On the operational side, we do call these our key performance indicators. And although you're going to hear the mention of the operational side of the house, our focus today will be on the strategy side of the house. So our journey, a little background, began back in early 2016, where the team did conduct individual interviews with all of our board members. We hosted several workshops with the board where together we developed these strategic goals, objectives, and our strategic measures. And during this last development cycle, we also refreshed our mission and vision statement. So in these workshops, we shared a lot of analysis information and environmental scan activities, as well as a significant amount of stakeholder input and feedback. So we hosted several focus group discussions, and we did phone interviews with many of our stakeholder groups, including the state administration, employer, labor, retiree, and pension associations. We spoke with our federal representatives and many other business partners within the health and investment arena. The first reading of the plan, so the timing was presented back in December of 2016. The board approved the plan in February of 2017. So we have launched on schedule in July of 2017. That year at the July offsite, as Marcy mentioned, we also refined together with the board's input and review the strategic measures that we're managing to today. So there was a lot of feedback in that area. And each year, what we do is we evaluate the business plan initiatives as well that really help move the organization forward. So what's the work we need to do to accomplish our goals and initiatives? And then we also take an annual review. So once we identified those initial operational performance indicators, we continue to monitor those and make sure we have meaningful metrics. Our enterprise planning process from formulation to execution and maintaining a performance-driven culture has significantly matured over the past several years. Most significantly, the process of developing and implementing metrics to measure our performance over the life of the plan was done from the very beginning. Our last strategic plan did not have a measurement component. And in addition, we were inspired by Marcy to develop measures related to our operational performance. So this really allows us to create and maintain a consistent platform for all functions at CalPERS. In the past, our pioneers were our customer service and support area and our investment office teams. They were focused on reporting metrics related to their performance, and we really wanted, and it was important for us to have accountability throughout the organization. We also moved away from siloed reporting to various board committees at different times throughout the year to reporting quarterly to the full Board of Administration. That's what we do today. This has enhanced continuity, transparency, and has helped streamline our operations. Inclusion of our executive leaders has enhanced engagement in the performance reporting process, which allows focused discussion with the board on those items that are in need of your attention, so those things at risk or off target. And of course, communication of all of the strategic measures, details, the business plan initiatives, and those KPIs are fully described within the board material and reported on quarterly as well. Each metric has thresholds, as Marcy mentioned, very important, and targets that really provide us that proactive and timely action. The majority of our measures are data-driven. However, we do have a few that are more informational in nature, and this helps us describe the program function as comprehensively as we can. So to date, we're reporting on 34 strategic measures, 34 business plan initiatives, and 60 key performance indicators. Again, our focus when we report to the board are on those items in the forefront of our strategic priorities. So this is that comprehensive view of the goals for the life of our plan for 2017 through 2022. And our executive team is going to speak to each one of these goals in just a minute to reinforce the alignment of our strategic plan. This here highlights the connection between our goals, our measures, and our initiatives. So of course our goals are providing us that focused direction over this 5-year time frame. Our objectives are helping us identify how we're going to get to these goals with statements of measurable action. And our measures are demonstrating how well we're performing based on the goals and the targets that we've set. Our business plan initiatives are tracking the project activities to help us move the needle related to our goals and our measures. All of these components help us maintain accountability at the highest level in the most transparent way. So before I turn this over to the executive team to focus in on each goal and some key measures, are there any questions about our strategic framework, our reporting process, or how we've got to where we are today? Okay, so we are headed into the 3rd year of our strategic plan. So we wanted to discuss why are these goals important to us? What accomplishments have we experienced so far? What challenges do we face? And what do we see on the horizon? And the executive team will try to answer those questions as they're going through. The first goal, we're going to start with fund sustainability. Both Scott and Dan will speak to this section, and then once they get through that section, we'll open it up for Q&A or comments, and then we'll move on to the next goal. All right, so with that, I'm turning it over to Scott.
All right, thank you, Sabrina, and good afternoon, everyone. Scott Tarando, Chief Actuary for CalPERS. On this page right here, what you can see is we have these 5 strategic objectives for fund sustainability over the top, and underneath that we have the 6 strategic measures. An actuary can't count, so
You're fine.
If it's not in the billions, it doesn't register here. So underneath each of the strategic measures, you can see the various business plan initiatives that we have here. So moving on to the first objective here, we have the fund the system through an integrated view of pension assets and liabilities. And we have 2 measures here, the funded status and the projected funded status. I think that's pretty self-evident of what we're going here. We're looking at the funded status. That's the ratio of assets to liabilities. And it kind of gives you a measure of the health of the pension plan. In terms of projected funded status, what that is that kind of looks at where we are and how does it compare to what we thought we were going to be in the previous year. It kind of gives us a gauge of, are we on the correct path for where we are? Marcy mentioned our funded status right now is around 70%. That's in the red. But are we improving from where we were? A couple years ago, we were around 68%, so we've improved 2 to 3% over the last couple years, and so we are making progress. To put things in perspective, our funded status around 10 years ago was 61%. So we've improved about 10% over the last 10 years. But if you go back just 2 years from that, we were at 100%. So what happened is we dropped 40% in 2 years, and it's taken 10 years just to recover up to 10%. So if you're looking at kind of the challenge that we're facing, it's taken us a long time just to make up the 10% of the 40% drop that we had in 2 years. And while we've dropped the discount rate and we've shortened the amortization, it kind of illustrates the challenges that the employers and we're facing in terms of the heavy lift that's going to be necessary to get our funded status up to the green level. The next item we have here is what we call to educate the stakeholder education. The goal here is to educate them stakeholders and keep them engaged, and help them understand how we balance the risk and the mitigations to achieve our goals. We've done a number of outreach and presentations to the various stakeholder associations. In fact, Marcy's made over 35 presentations over the last year to the various associations, individual employers, and business groups. We had our first educational session for local elected officials last year at the Ed Forum, and we plan on continuing that this year, maybe not at the Ed Forum, but having a special meeting with local elected officials to get their input on CalPERS issues. And finally, we will also plan on developing a handbook that will highlight some of the items that we've discussed at the Ed Forum this year. In terms of the stakeholder survey, we see higher satisfaction results on both the long-term trend questions on both the member and employer side, but we have somewhat of mixed results on these stakeholder leaders. We'll have more information with the board in August concerning with these results. We'll have a full presentation, and I think Brad will step through all the questions and give you guys updated results based on the survey that we just completed about a month or so ago. With that, I'll pass along to Dan.
Okay, before you move to Dan, Ms. Brown has a question.
Thank you, Scott. You know, when I look at this PowerPoint, and so we've got fund sustainability as the goal on the left, then we have other little circles, and then we have the business plan initiatives. And so you talk about redesign and enhance the actuarial evaluation system. So is that something that has been done or is in the process of being done? And is this one of the things that's going to have the little green, yellow, and red circles later? But they're not in this presentation, right?
That's correct. They're not in this presentation, but you get them quarterly. We'll be providing the fourth quarter report in August.
So this is explaining how why you might be red, or I'm sure you're green. I'm sure you're green.
Well, the funded status is red.
Okay. Well, not that part. All right. But so I just want to know. So these are things we're working. Go ahead and explain.
Right, but we can talk about the business initiatives if you really want to hit them real quick.
I just want to kind of overview because every slide has business plan initiatives on it.
Right, and we didn't. We want to I took a more higher level. I didn't want to get into the business plan initiatives specifically, but if you want, the AVSRE redesign, it was completed this year in the 18-19 year on schedule, under budget, and we're using it to do the valuations right now.
This is the first time we're using them?
Correct. Okay. So that was green all the way. The next phase, AAI, as we call it, that's on schedule, under budget as well, and it will be completed June 30th, 2020. That's for this fiscal year. So, and then the ALM, that's just an ongoing process. Next year, we will be presenting the CMAs, the mid-year, what they call the mid-year review in the investment committee. Those will be coming in June of 2020 also. So that's on schedule and scheduled to be presented next June.
Now, one more question with regard to the first one. You called it the AVS. What did you call it? The RAVS? Sorry. The redesign and enhance the actual. What's it?
Yeah, I call it AVSRE. It's called the Actuarial Evaluation System Redesign and Enhance. Just take the two words.
There you go. AVSRE. Your AVSRE system are we expecting that to change? Are we expecting that to increase or decrease? Have you played with it a little bit or done a little pilot on it?
Well, yeah. The results for the state and school evaluations already have been done, and the public agencies are being done on the new system. In terms of, are you asking, did it have an impact on the liabilities? It did. Generally, we saw I want to say the present value future benefits stayed about the same, slight decrease in the normal costs and an increase in the accrued liabilities.
And overall, about what percent change?
Generally around less than 1%.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, very good. Thank you. So Dan.
All right, thank you. Let's see, the third strategic objective under fund sustainability is mitigating the risk of significant investment loss. The strategic measure is the 1-year total expected volatility, with the initiatives being around risk management and then around performance attribution. Certainly, Ben covered yesterday some of the things we're doing around risk management. There obviously was a number of historical things, and frankly, risk management is part of portfolio management every day, but also Ben's arrival and some of the perspectives Ben has brought has certainly had some impact, and as I say, we covered those last night. But in addition to that, I would also just call your attention to the asset segment work that's been implemented that I think we talked about a little bit yesterday. That increased the use of treasuries and created a factor-weighted equity sleeve in the portfolio. That resulted in a portfolio that gives similar expected return with about 30 basis points or 0.3% lower volatility. Then on performance attribution, I would just call your attention to a couple of achievements. One is a creation of our proprietary active risk measurement and performance attribution framework that was built over the last couple of years. And then about 2 years ago, we came up with the ability to one of the first asset owners to be able to claim GIPS compliance on our fund performance. So that's a big thing. We were a real leader in the U.S., especially asset owner space. All right, the fourth strategic objective under fund sustainability is delivering risk-adjusted returns, with the strategic measure being the annualized 5-year excess return relative to the policy benchmark. Candidly, we are under this, and this isn't an area that we're about 23 basis points behind, earning 5.8% versus a benchmark of about 6. Again, we talked about some of the things that we're doing in this space, focusing on this, both absolute return and relative return. I would call your attention to a couple of things. The initiatives here are about enhancing the capital allocation framework and about the investment platform and controls. I would call your attention to not only the new asset allocation for the PERF that includes the segments, but also the new asset allocation for all the affiliates, including the SEP that was new this past year. We've also built an ability to allocate to the growth asset class, so that combines public equity and private equity and allows us to do completion across those two asset classes. And then, of course, there's been all the work around private equity and ability to deploy more capital into the private equity space with the work around pillars, co-investments, et cetera. With respect to the investment platform and controls, just a couple of initiatives I called your attention to where we've made some progress. First is the data strategy. We now have a framework around data governance that is a model that is both built, the model, and then also staffed. And then we've also entered into a contract with a vendor to provide a data as a service. So we've made some progress there. There's still much more work to do there around data, but I've heard the term that data is kind of the new oil, and I'm a believer in that. The data is critical, and we've got to get our data right. So that's something that we're really focused on. And then the other area is around a single platform for public markets trading, so a multi-asset trading platform. The idea there is to have all fixed income and equity products be able to be traded on the same platform. We have a pilot in place right now, and once that's complete, that has great reduction in complexity, reduction in operational risk, and then also improvements in efficiency. So we're encouraged about that. And then the final area I would call your attention to under fund sustainability is about integrating ESG considerations into our investment decision-making process. Just a couple of successes to point out. First of all, the corporate governance team over the last couple of years is now completely integrated into global equity. So they certainly collaborate very closely with the sustainable investments team, but the idea was to take the core workload around corporate governance, which is proxy voting and engagement, and put it right next to the equity asset class. We've also, in the last couple of years, hired a new managing investment director of sustainable investments. Beth Richtman is in place, and that team is built, and then, of course, a number of research initiatives have been carried out under her leadership. And then the final area I'd call your attention to is some of our engagement strategies. Certainly, we have a number of engagements going on, but there are 3 main themes. First of all, the Climate Action 100+, our engagements around board diversity, and then finally around executive comp. So I think that takes us through what we had prepared to talk about under fund sustainability, but before we move on to healthcare affordability, Scott and I are happy to take any further questions.
It's not a question, it's just perhaps a comment on this whole fund sustainability issue. The document that staff has prepared, the solid foundation for the future, I've talked to retiree chapters throughout the state, for at least 30 over this fiscal year, and I've used that document to share with our members what we're doing to make sure that the fund is sustainable going forward. And it talks about the discount rate, it talks about shortening the amortization rate, and it also talks about asset allocation. And I just want to share with the staff that a number of retirees have sent me notes and said that's an excellent document because it sets forth very clearly what CalPERS is doing to be sure that our fund is sustainable and that the benefits will be there for them in the future. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Question?
Jason?
I just didn't catch the certification that we achieved.
So the certification is GIPS, which is the Global Investment Performance Standards. It's part of the CFA Institute. They, years ago, they created a set of standards that you have to meet a number of criteria to be able to claim compliance. Originally, asset managers started doing it about 6 or 8 years ago. They created an asset owner version of it. And we started migrating towards compliance about 3 years ago, and we're able to achieve compliance, I think, 2 years ago, which, again, we're one of the first. What it speaks to is what kind of fees are included in your performance, what sort of calculation standards go into them to allow for an apples-to-apples comparison of performance. Because if one asset owner has fees and another asset owner does not have fees included in their performance, those are inconsistent in their comparison. So we're one of the first to be able to do that.
All right. Any other questions? Very good. We're going to move on to our healthcare affordability area and turn it over to Leanna.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Leanna Bailey-Crimmins, Chief Health Director. The CalPERS Strategic Goal, Healthcare Affordability, has 3 objectives. The first is to promote high-value care by doing innovative benefit design changes, which this board adopted the value-based insurance design, so there's been a lot of successes. That is an example of what we've done in this arena. Second is to improve the health status of our members, their families, and the communities that they live in. We want our members to be healthy, and the CalPERS holds our health plans accountable to provide health and wellness programs and improving health outcomes. And third, we want to reduce the overuse of ineffective or unnecessary medical care. And Health and Human Services, Cover California, and CalPERS have partnered as part of Smart Care California, and we have laser focused on opioid management, cesarean, basically first-time low-risk cesarean sections, and actually reducing over-imaging of lower back care, and there's been significant progress in these 3 arenas. So under high-value care, you can see there are 2 areas that we measure: access, very important, and then obviously premiums. We want to affect the total healthcare cost. The last 3 years, we've been very successful of having our premiums from an overall aggregate perspective less than the CPI. This year, for 2020, will be coming out in December, January timeframe, so we'll see how we'll be doing there. But how we affect that is on the far right with the business initiatives. So value-based insurance design, we talk about it, but our PPO members now have HMO-like offering where they have coordinated personal physician care if they choose to do so, which we find very helpful. And our also members have the opportunity to get deductible credits by doing healthy preventative care like getting flu shots, biometric screening, and other things. In addition, as we talk about, one more back, medical pharmacy. It's the right care at the right time. For you guys, when we talk about access and helping reduce premiums, it's important for you to realize that there are certain medications that must be infused. And it's much more cost effective for us to actually deliver that in the home of our members or at an infusion center than it is an outpatient hospital. So there's been a lot of shift, which helps quality, patient safety, and also reduces cost. The pharmacy benefit manager contract, we've saved $64 million in the first year. 100% of that went back to reduce premiums. And then for medical reference pricing, we've been very successful. We added 12 additional procedures. Again, all of that savings goes back to reduce the cost of healthcare for our members and employers. Next one. All right, for the improving the health status of our members, the families that they live with, and the communities where they live and they serve. One of the things that we want to look at is diabetes, mental health, and self-reported overall health status. So one of the things we look at is healthcare from a population perspective. So California had a Let's Get Healthy California dashboard, and what we wanted to do was either meet or surpass that for our population health dashboard. And annually it comes out to the board and is reported in December, and so this year will be the third year that we've reported how we're doing in these three arenas. I will tell you as a challenge, these are three areas that are self-reported. So when we talk about diabetes self-management, it is if you happen to be diabetic, are you actually measuring your glucose? And that is through an annual survey. In addition, with mental health and well-being, when you want access or need access for your family, do you feel like you're actually receiving that access? So these are all self-reporting, and that is a challenge, and we're looking at making sure that as the national standards start to improve in these three areas, that we look at our metrics and potentially change those. And then as reported last month, we now have a website where our members do not have to go out to each plan's website to see what's going on when it comes to health and wellness. We have on the CalPERS website a single source where they can see what's happening when it comes to getting free yoga classes, Pilates, and actually doing health and wellness within their family. So again, this hopefully will improve and do preventative outreach and be able to allow people to be healthy in their communities. So a lot of success in this area. And then next one. Opioid dose, C-section rates. We've been, again, a partner for Smart Care California for many years. A lot of progress has been put into this arena. For opioid alone, this last year we reported that we've reduced claims by 19%, and for utilization, we've reduced utilization by 15%, but what's even more important is basically new therapy. So we want people that actually have pain management not to get addicted in the first place, and so what we've done is we looked at that, and anything that was deemed high dose, we've actually reduced prescribers from actually doing that by 85%, which is a huge, huge accomplishment. And for C-sections, we were able to, as a part of the Smart Care California, 112 hospitals this last year reported of being on the honor roll and actually reducing medically unnecessary C-sections, which was, again, very important for the mothers and their children, and obviously to the cost of the system. So a lot of progress in these areas. And then last slide. So want to also just point out for challenges, the national standards are consistently changing. Some of them for mental health, they're still trying to figure it out at the national level. And then for high-dose opioids, we're finding that even the number, right now it's 50 morphine milligram equivalents, are actually changing. So as that continues to evolve, we will be bringing that back through our quarterly dashboards to see if we need to change any of those metrics. So that currently is a challenge. And on the horizon, we've made successful changes when it comes to medical reference pricing. This next year, you will see where we are going to actually start doing reference pricing for pharmacy. And so we are excited about in January introducing 8 therapeutic drug classes that we will be offering, and hopefully again improving the health care of our members and reducing cost. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Donna, who's going to talk about reducing complexity.
Thank you, Leanna. Donna Lum, CalPERS team leader. I'm really pleased today to present the next several slides with Michael Cohen, who's going to partner with me along this. So when we talk about reducing complexity, we're really looking at it across the organization. And as you can see with the slide here, we have 2 strategic objectives. The first one is to simplify programs to improve service and reduce cost. And the second is to streamline operations to gain efficiencies, improve productivity, and to reduce costs. So before we get started, one of the things I'd like to do, since we have several new board members who had not been with us since we did our last CEM update last year, is to provide you with kind of a foundation of how we get to a complexity score and our utilization of CEM. So by way of background, CalPERS participates in CEM, which is also known as the Cost Effectiveness Measurement Benchmarking. CEM is a global organization that benchmarks not only pension systems, but investments as well. And I think many of you are familiar with the work that our investment office has done around CEM. But just to give you context, the CEM database has about 65 pension systems from around the world, including those in the United States, the UK, Canada, and the Netherlands. And in order to compare ourselves against a like set of peers, what CEM has done is identified 8 peer groups that are generally similar to us. Now, that being said, and you'll hear a little bit more about complexity, they are the best set of 8 that is near us in terms of the services that we provide, but certainly we are far more complex and we do serve a lot of members. So just to give you an idea of who those are, we are compared against the Texas Teachers Retirement System, New York, CalSTRS, BC Pension Corp, Michigan, Ohio, and Ontario Teachers Retirement System. Now, when we engage in CEM, there are well over 600 questions that are asked throughout CalPERS to collect information about operations, our front office, and our back office. And the compilation of that gives us 3 pieces of information that are very critical in running the operations at CalPERS. And that is, we are able to obtain a service level score, as well as a complexity score. And then the third area is our cost per member. And so Michael and I will kind of go through each of those with you. Although we are going to be focusing the primary discussion around reducing complexity, as I mentioned, there are 3 things that are measured. Service score is one of them, and service doesn't fall into complexity. But I do want to share with you that since we have been participating in CEM since 2016, we have seen a significant increase in the customer service score. And in fact, our report this last report gave us a score of 80, which is well above the peer medium of the peers that we are benchmarked against, which their peer average was a 75. So I share that with you because I think it's important to know that as we talk about complexity, complexity does drive service and it does drive cost. And although we are the most complex system in the universe of the CEM benchmarking, I think the fact that we achieve a higher level of service score, customer service score than our peers really does say a lot in terms of what the organization has done in the areas of complexity and cost. So moving on to the next slide. When we talk about do I have a clicker? Oh, okay. I'm looking at mine, not yours. So when it comes to CEM complexity, as I just said, we are very complex as an organization. There are a number of things that we do that drive complexity, and a lot of it has to do with the customization of our plans, how we offer payment options, and the different types of plans that we have. Our focus over the last couple of years is to reduce the complexity. Again, complexity does drive service and cost. And so what we've done is we've identified areas that we have the potential to reduce complexity. However, every area that we have analyzed, and this has come from our research group, requires legislative changes. These are not things that we can do independently within the system to be able to reduce complexity, and I think that's an important factor. But we have reduced complexity in the organization, and I think we are headed in the right direction. The other area that is part of simplifying our services is centered around information technology capability score, which CEM also does measure. And I'm really pleased to say that the advantages of the technology capabilities that we have in the system has really aided in the ability for us to be able to provide critical services to our members and employers. What CEM does is it benchmarks the services and the products on the information systems and the tools that are utilized in order to deliver these services. Christian and his team has done an outstanding job. We score here an 82, which is we have a score of 85. I don't want to shortchange you, which is above our peer medium of 82. So again, we do have very strong IT capability, and that does lend to our ability to provide services. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Michael. He's going to talk about investment manager reduction and the next couple of slides as well.
Thanks, Donna. This next slide, if you can go ahead and, I guess before we do that, I'm supposed to talk about the external manager reduction, which I think Ben hit on yesterday enough that sort of this is a multi-year plan to bring more things in-house that we're on track to meet our goals. And now we can go to the next slide, which is more focused on administrative costs. And this really fits into one of the challenge areas that we've had in terms of our operational needs, meeting our members' demands, and also trying to meet the intent of the strategic measures. So Donna talked about the CEM pension the CEM process, and so one of the things they mention, they measure is the cost per member. That's really sort of the cost on an administrative basis of providing services. Certainly the complexity of the CalPERS system drives costs, as well as our emphasis on staff. Staff costs are really the driving force of what our costs are. And so unless you have an increasing number of members in the system that you're dividing your overall costs on, our cost per member is going to go up, whereas the measure is intended for us to go down. So whereas in 2016-17, the cost per member was $207 per member, it went up to $211. That's really driven a lot on the statewide collective bargaining process, as well as our rising retirement rates that all employers within the system are experiencing. And so with a relatively flat member base, you see the costs rise. To focus a little bit more in depth on challenges, the overhead operational costs is another good example of where the wording on these things really matters. The way the measure was presented to the board, it talks about a 1.5% to 2% annual reduction below the 2016-17 amount. That really implies over a 5-year period, you're going to have reduced your admin costs by up to 10% in totality. However, halfway through the strategic plan period, we really hadn't seen the board adopt budgets that had any path towards such a large reduction in our admin staff. And so as we put together this year's budget, we as an executive team really focused on, okay, what would it take to meet this sort of long-term objective of reducing 2% every single year? And we came to the conclusion that sure, we can meet it, but not without a significant deterioration of our customer service and our ability to meet our mission. So when we bring this back in August, you'll see a suggested change where we're looking to reduce our admin costs below 2016-17 by up to 2% a year, but keep it at that level that we think the incremental growth of hitting below the target every single year is probably unreasonable, and the budget you just adopted in May will get us to that place, but it doesn't put us on a path to sort of reduce admin costs by 10%, and we think that's kind of a reasonable place to sort of maintain our cost structure as low as possible. Marcy's mentioned a couple times the position pooling, and that's a way that by not growing the number of staff within the CalPERS universe, we're able to maintain our costs relatively flat once you take out kind of those costs that are outside of our control. So let me turn it back to Donna to finish up this item.
Thank you, Michael. So we talked a little bit about the successes, and as I mentioned, over the 3-year period that we've been engaged, we have seen our complexity score go down, our customer service score go up, and our costs start to average and stabilize a little. The other thing is, although we have outperformed our peers as a success in the area of IT capability, the other thing that I wanted to mention here is that we've also reduced IT-related costs through business initiatives as well, so that was another success. As far as challenges, we will continue to be challenged to reduce our complexity score. However, as opportunities prevail and we have items and initiatives that may be feasible, we'll continue to bring them forward for consideration, but recognizing that there are big things that have to happen to change that. The one major contributor to our last reduction in our complexity score had to do with our retirement option simplification. So that required a legislative change. That was our ability to take payment options from 13 down to 7. But again, that just gives you an idea of what kinds of activities it will take to change complexity. Some of the other challenges that we see, Michael has touched upon, and that has to do with the costing of our budget and the anticipated reductions that were set out in the strategic plan that I think are going to be revisited. And then on the horizon, one of the things that we will be doing in the area of IT, which we've done in the area of customer service, is utilizing the CEM report to identify where we do have some potential gaps, where we might even be able to increase our capability above and beyond where we are today. That's an important piece of analysis that will inform us from a business perspective on what our needs could be. And then with regards to investments, they do have a 2019-20 business plan initiative that is centered around enhancing their effectiveness, how they do resource allocation, efficiencies of the investment program. So those are some of the upcoming things that you'll see on the horizon with regards to reducing complexity across the enterprise. And both Michael and I are available to take any questions that you may have at this time.
Ms. Brown?
Thank you. I don't really have a question. I just don't want Scott to feel like he's being picked on. No, I'm kidding. I do have a question, or more of a statement. I really appreciate the reducing the complexity and that you're working towards that, but I really don't want us to shy away from things that require a legislative change. I mean, I think we've got some horsepower here on this board and on staff, and I think we should, if it's going to reduce complexity and help us save on costs, I think we should ask the legislature to do that. And so I hope we don't shy away, at least from having the conversation, and let's jump in and get it going. We shouldn't shy away just because it requires a legislative change. I know Marcy's been successful in the past on some ventures, and we should keep pushing forward on that. If that's what we need, that's what we should do. Thank you.
Well, appreciate your comments in that area. And as I mentioned, as we have these opportunities prevail themselves, I think they will be good. We will bring them before each of the committees, because I think it's very important to be informed about what those options are and then the implications. But certainly, we're very focused on this area and would engage the board appropriately as well.
I did also want to make a comment on reducing complexity. I did hear from a member about who has to make co-pays on their health care, but they can't pay online, or you can't do it that way. You have to mail in a check. And I heard back from her after she had spoke to someone in the department that said, you're going to be starting that in early 2020. I hope that's true. But that's awesome for our members. Now, I don't know if that's reducing your complexity, but it certainly is reducing our members' complexity.
If I could just respond to that as well. So yes, there are a number of initiatives that we are looking at that reduce complexity within the organization that may not necessarily influence a reduction in the complexity score, but that's all a big part of the streamlining and efficiency initiatives that all of the organization is engaged in. So whether it's in the fiscal office, the HR office, customer service, we don't stop at only looking at the things that are in the CEM report. We are looking at lean initiatives that do exactly what you're mentioning across the enterprise.
Okay, Marlene and I are going to take the next objective, risk management. This is really the activities that are covered in the Risk and Audit Committee on a regular basis. You see here on the slide, the goal is to cultivate a risk-intelligent organization. That doesn't mean that we never take risks. It's just a matter of when we take a risk, we should be aware of what we're doing and make sure that the upside is worth the potential downfalls. The two areas of focus here are enhancing compliance and risk functions throughout the organization, and then the second one is cybersecurity, which we just talked about. So let me turn it over to Marlene for the next slide.
Good afternoon. Marlene Timberlake, Diadamo Chief Compliance Officer, CalPERS team member. As Michael talked about on slide 27, the Cultivate a Risk Intelligent Organization is our goal. The objective is to enhance our compliance and risk functions throughout the enterprise. The 5 blue, dark blue circles really represent the metrics that we use in order to ascertain how well we are doing with our objectives. And so what we do is on an annual basis, the organization does an employee survey which measures the awareness of our employees of compliance and risk functions and how the compliance and risk, how they actually work with compliance and risk. The questions are, I'm aware of the CalPERS risk program and I incorporate it into my daily life, and that question is asked of each employee with respect to both compliance and risk. And we take those and we report the survey results annually. The second measure that we have is also a stakeholder survey, which I think Scott mentioned the results will be released next month regarding that question. And then the last item that we use for a measure is the program maturity assessments. And those of you who might not be familiar, but in June when we come to the Risk and Audit Committee, we actually talk about how we're doing with our maturity assessments. And so those are the ways that we measure. And then the initiatives that we do are different initiatives that are aimed at increasing the maturity. And so we do things around policies and delegations work, operational risk, manage reporting channels, and other initiatives that we have listed, all designed to improve the awareness of compliance and risk functions throughout the organization. So now I'll move it over to Michael to cover the next slide.
Sure. So this next slide really is an opportunity to show how the panels that we've been bringing to you sort of fit into this strategic measurement here on cybersecurity, the panel you just heard. And Christian really kind of gave you the short talking points in one of his responses where he said, we've got this score that we do twice a year, and that we'll be bringing it back to you in August. So I think that's probably all there is to say on this slide.
Great. So on slide 29, I wanted to give the results of the surveys for the employee surveys, and both compliance and risk showed significant improvement in the employee awareness survey. Compliance is on target with a 90% of survey results answering yes to the questions that I had just briefly outlined. And with respect to risk, they exceeded their target with 89% of survey respondents answering yes to the questions. So we are on target, well on target, and moving forward with continuing to increase awareness of compliance and risk activities. In terms of, on slide 29, challenges, we really don't see any foreseen challenges, meaning that we don't see a reason why we can't continue to improve these objectives, but improve our goals. But we will continue every year as you see our business plans come forward, initiatives that we'll take to make sure that we're increasing awareness for both our employees and our stakeholders, and that we're also improving the maturity of our programs. In terms of what's on the horizon, 2 areas. Continue our efforts to increase the enterprise-wide compliance and risk. We're going to enhance compliance and ethics education by implementing a training plan for fiscal year 1920 that combines both web-based and instructor-led formats. And the enterprise data management is also going to be a topic that we're going to be working on. It's a multi-year initiative, and we plan to continue our awareness efforts and focus on policy review and development with respect to that. At this point, I will turn it over and see if there's any questions.
Ms. Middleton?
Thank you. And those surveys are really important because it does matter that employees and stakeholders understand risk. But those are self-reporting. And we all know that self-reporting measures are not as accurate as ones where we actually are doing testing. And I'm not sure I follow where there are measures of actual changes in performance and work habits as a result of the education programs.
Is that a question? So you said you're not sure that where there is measures. Well, so what I would say is it's important. I agree that the surveys are important, but they are sort of dependent upon the individuals to understand what is being asked, and it's an interpretive question. I think the one other thing that we do in addition to the surveys is we actually assess the maturity of the programs. And we do that by looking at the activities that we're doing versus a benchmark. So we actually have a benchmark that we use, and we assess how mature our program is versus a benchmark of peers. And so that, I think, gives us a lot of I don't know if comfort is the right word, but certainly it helps us to make sure that we really are being broad in our questioning and that we're really making sure that we're looking at things as they are occurring in the industry.
And I would just add there too, on the operational side of the house related to compliance and risk, we have several key performance indicators that actually measure specific risk or compliance activities within the operations of the organization. So that information is also available quarterly.
Thanks, Sabrina.
Welcome.
Okay, continue.
Good afternoon, Doug Hoffner, Deputy Executive Officer. So I've got the last two here related to talent management. And the objective really is to recruit and empower a broad range of talents to meet their organizational goals, with the emphasis that the employees are our greatest asset in this organization. What we tried to really focus on here is trying to use survey information and data to help understand how we're getting and recruiting and bringing people into the organization. Now, whether they're successful in those interviews, we're just going to get a handle on how they're coming to us, from referrals to actual surveys. Using a lot of information, particularly with social media now, we're actually going out advertising not on just Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and we've seen considerable growth in this last year. So between 20 and 25% growth in some of these new channels. And so the idea is, as we get more information and we continue to track this over time, it's really hone in on where those that return on investment. Some of the channels, particularly LinkedIn, there's recruiter seats we can use for hard to recruit positions. So there's a fee associated with that we want to make sure we're getting our money's worth as well. I would also highlight, I think there's an opportunity to sort of crowdsource here. We look at the amount of followers that CalPERS as an institution and organization has when it comes to these social media channels. But we as collective individuals have hundreds, if not thousands, of our own Twitter and or LinkedIn followers. I know Christian does a very good job of this. When we post jobs online, he's sharing them out. And they're not necessarily IT positions, but he's advocating on behalf of CalPERS to bring in and recruit people to come to the organization. So that's hitting his network of another 1,000 people. So I think there's opportunities for us to grow the channels. We'll have to leverage that within the existing resources we have, but I do think there's a great challenge there to really pick up on the skill sets and resources that we have as a collective, not just the people in this room today, but the organization itself. The others we're focusing on relate to 3 different engagement survey focus points. We've been engaged in the engagement survey with the team members for the last 2 years. We've had a 71% participation rate, which is quite good. That's up another % from the first year in 2017. We're focusing here on basically diversity, inclusion, accountability, and then we had the relationships with the senior leaders and executives within the organization. What we focused on that first 2 years is really how do we improve. Diversity, inclusion, we had a good track record. We're in a high-performing state with this organization. Those are trend questions that are going out to the employees, and based on their viewpoints about diversity and inclusion in CalPERS. There's still more to be done, and we heard a little bit from Clint yesterday in the other panel, but I think it's really indicative of the work that we're doing as a collective, not just with the internal employees, but bringing and recruiting people to come in from very diverse backgrounds in this organization. From accountability, this was a lower scoring engagement driver we had in the prior year. Putting focus on that and attention by the executive senior leaders in the organization, we saw a 10% increase over the last year. That put us in a high performing category based on the methodology of our third party survey company that we use, which is quite impressive. We've had accountability scores that we've looked at through prior assessments, going back to the organizational health index that we've used historically. That was always considered one of the lower scoring drivers. So I think a lot to be said for increasing that score over this last year, and we'll be doing the next survey in a few months. We'll see what progress to be made there will be from that point going forward. And then the final one on this slide, back it up one, will be related to the engagement of our senior and executive management relationships. And this is really through focus groups. What the employees and team members told us was they really want to get to know us better, like that we're real people, that we understand how we got to CalPERS and what our experience has been, and talk about mentoring and leadership and those kinds of things. We've seen that dipped a little bit, but there's been tremendous effort in terms of the folks in this room, the division chiefs and other managers in CalPERS, to really put an emphasis on who we are, and that's really from a cross-functional perspective, not just me talking to the people within the operational technology branch, but really reaching out to other parts of the organization and vice versa, having team leaders come in and speak to the health programs or the investment office, et cetera, where they might on a daily basis not have that interaction, and really opening those channels up through brand lunches and other venues for members to really get to engage with us. So more of that will continue. The next slide, please. This measure relates to cultivating leadership competencies. So 2 years ago, we developed leadership competencies throughout this organization based on level, what we expected of every individual leader within CalPERS, as well as competencies that we expect of every employee of the organization. We went through the unions on the employee side, and we've embedded the leadership competencies in all the duty statements, performance metrics, analytics related to basically what those expectations are as we look to go through performance measures with employees. So that was built and developed. We're rolling out, we've piloted an automated tool to help do that through some of our employee development dashboards. So that'll be something that you're going to see consistently across this organization. And I think it's going to was quite well respected and received by the employees as this information rolled out. Next slide will be sort of challenges. As we're talking about workforce and people, ever-changing demographics of an organization, we'll always have people moving through this organization and changing and evolving. So it's always going to be constant to make sure that we have the right talent for the right skills in this organization to fulfill the mission on behalf of the 1.9 million members. So that's going to be ongoing, but I think we're up for the task. So without that, any questions, I'll just pause here for now.
No
All right,
questions?
no questions. All righty. So in closing, thank you for having us today, and we appreciated the opportunity to really dig into our strategic plan. Our fourth quarter report, which will close out the 18-19 cycle, will be in August. We'll see you then.
Okay,
thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Marcy and Sabrina and the executive team. The performance management system we have here at CalPERS is a helpful tool for the board. So thank you for all of your work. Okay, that concludes our public meeting for today. On behalf of the board, I want to express appreciation for all the information that was presented by giving our teams and our visiting panelists a round of applause. And thank you to all of you in attendance for your continued interest and active involvement. So Karen, tell us about tomorrow.
Well, right now, Henry, the board is going to take a quick break and meet back here for closed session. So for members of the board and our executive team, please be back here in about 10 minutes for our closed session. For those in our audience, we will begin tomorrow's session at 8:30 back here in this room. Enjoy the rest of your day.